My presentation is on intellectual disabilities. What is an intellectual disability? So an ID is characterized by significant limitations in intellectual functioning, significant limitations in adaptive behavior, and onset in childhood. So intellectual functioning can be anything like reasoning, problem solving, and learning. Adaptive behavior is those conceptual, social, and practical skills that we use in everyday life, so like time and social interactions and self-care. And onset in childhood, so it's just all these things show before the age of 18. Some intellectual disabilities are Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, Fragile X syndrome, Apert syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, and Williams syndrome. Some causes of ID are genetic disorders, so Down syndrome, Fragile X, and PKU are all caused by a disorder in the genes. Birth trauma, so asphyxia is the lack of oxygen to the baby during birth. Infectious disease like rubella or meningitis, so either the mother can pass this on to their baby or their baby gets exposed to this disease before they're vaccinated and it can cause an ID. Maternal factors during pregnancy, so if the mother drinks alcohol, smokes, or uses drugs, it can cause an ID. Prematurity, so if they don't fully develop in utero or if they're born with a low birth weight. Poverty, cultural deprivation, so malnutrition, insufficient health care, inadequate educational support can all cause an ID. How common are intellectual disabilities? So approximately 6.5 million people in the United States have an ID. Approximately 2.3% of the global population, so that's about 200 million people in the entire world. And they're more common in low-income countries, so that's 16 in every 1,000 people in low-income countries. Exercise and intellectual disabilities. So cardiorespiratory responses to aerobic exercise. So they're going to have a lower max heart rate, lower cardiac output, lower peak aerobic capacity. So this all affects their respiratory endurance. And aerobic exercise, they're just going to have a lot of lower things due to their heart. Responses during resistance exercise, so 30% to 50% reductions in expected strength, reduced strength even in very active individuals, cardiac autonomic dysfunction. So even in strong and active individuals, their strength is still going to be lower than the typical person due to their low muscle tone and other parts of their condition. Some physical conditions to be aware of. There's a higher risk of obesity and cardiovascular disease due to their sedentary lifestyle. So a lot of people with intellectual disabilities lead an unhealthy and sedentary lifestyle just because if they live in a group home, that's kind of what they do, and they're not as knowledgeable about the important effects of eating healthy and being active, so they just tend to be more sedentary. Some physical conditions like low muscle tone and poor coordination can make exercising difficult or painful, so it's kind of hard for them to exercise, so they just choose not to, and even the exercise that they do might not be as intense as it needs to get the benefits. Medications and exercise. So some medications can be on antidepressants. A minor effect on the heart rate and BP during blood pressure during exercise, but may affect individuals' understanding and motivation to do exercise. Anticonvulsants and anti-epileptics, they appear safe to use with exercise, is what I found in the ACSM, and they may cause hyperinsulinemia, increased appetite, or hormonal changes, so it's something to just be aware of. Levothyroxine, so it's a thyroid replacement hormone. A lot of people with ID have issues with their thyroid and hormones. This causes an increased heart rate, blood pressure, and LVEF to a normal response. So the LVEF is just the left ventricle, how much blood it's pumping out. They're all reduced in people with IDs, so just this medication brings it up to normal, which increases the small risk of arrhythmia and some experience episodes of brief angina just because it's already being elevated, and then during exercise it gets elevated even more. And beta blockers are prescribed to reduce blood pressure, especially with people with IDs, have a lot of heart issues, so sometimes they have high blood pressure. So that medication causes lower heart rate and lower blood pressure during exercise, which might not be the normal effects of exercise. Epidemiology of intellectual disabilities and comorbid conditions. So this research study from the University of Hertfordshire shows that all of these conditions are increased in people with intellectual disabilities, especially diabetes, obesity, polypharmacy, multiple mobility. A lot of them experience epilepsy as well, which is why they're on medication for it. A lot of them just have a higher risk of CVD, so anything related like diabetes and obesity, that is super increased in IDs. As you can see, in obesity, it's 42% compared to the general population at 26%. And they have an increase to 6% to 2% of diabetes versus the general population. So this is just one of the studies that was shown that they do have an increased risk, and a lot of these can be decreased doing exercise. So if they were to participate in exercise more, all these conditions could be reduced and their risk could be reduced to getting them. Some special considerations for working with people with intellectual disabilities. They may require more encouragement during both exercise testing and training, so just really encourage them to work as hard as they can and keep a positive attitude throughout the whole thing, because if you have a positive attitude, they will have a positive attitude. And even if they might get discouraged, just try to be patient and keep them going and keep them motivated. They have problems with motor control, coordination, balance, and gait, and they're at a high risk for falls just due to their low muscle tone and poor coordination. So just be aware of this as they're exercising, and it may be better to do more seated exercises versus standing exercises until they build some more strength. Familiarization, practice, and supervision are so important for people with intellectual disabilities. Just being familiar with the area so they don't have anxiety coming in for the first time trying to do an exercise test. They're not going to perform well. Let them practice, get familiar with you and the equipment and everything. And as when they are working out or exercising, be sure to carefully supervise them, just if they need it, if they want it, and just in case anything happens, you'll be there. Include some diverse activities in your program, so anything with games and music and all that fun stuff. A lot of different variety of stuff so they don't get bored. They're more likely to adhere to the program if it's diverse. Encourage them to be involved in Special Olympics. A lot of people are already, but it's a really great program and a lot of people enjoy it, so that would be a great thing for them to be a part of. Specific physical features that may limit their exercise performance. So they do have, one of the characteristics is low muscle tone and just poor understanding, so they might just not be able to perform as high as you would like, but they're still performing. That doesn't mean they're not giving their best effort. They just physically aren't giving the typical performance level that you would see in the same aged equivalent. Pre-test screening would follow the ACSM guidelines, so just like any other typical adult. Adequate hydration, just make sure they're drinking a lot of water during exercise. Just sometimes they might not be thinking about it because they're having so much fun, or they just don't think go drink water, so reminder of water breaks is really important. ACSM has some things they don't recommend for exercise testing, so treadmill running, it's just a little dangerous, safer to do walking. 1 to 1.5 mile runs, it's just a little too long for their cardiorespiratory systems. Arm or cycle ergometry, so instead of doing just a single, like just arms or just legs, they would rather you do a full body exercise just to make it a little bit more coordinated. One arm with free weights, so it's a little bit safer to do it with machines, but obviously when they get stronger and they get more used to the routine, you feel free to add free weights into the program. And then they recommend not doing push-ups or the flexed arm hang. The case study, I have ML, is a 22-year-old female with an intellectual disability. She weighs 187 pounds and is 5 feet 1 inch tall. She takes an antidepressant called citalopram and an anticonvulsant, carbamazepine. And her resting blood pressure is 122 over 80 milligrams of mercury, and her resting heart rate is 64 beats per minute. She graduated high school in the spring, and she no longer participates in daily adaptive physical education, so she wants to start exercising regularly and needs a program to follow. She plays Special Olympics soccer once a week and works at Giant 3 times a week. Exercise testing that I did on her, so we did a 1 mile walk test. Her results, she completed it in 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Muscular strength, we did a 1RM using a weight machine, so she chose the leg press and she got 40 pounds, and the seated chest press, which she got 10 pounds. Muscular endurance, we did the 1 minute sit-up test and she completed 17 sit-ups. Body comp, we did BMI, she was 35.3, which is in the obese category. And flexibility, we did sit and reach, so on her right leg, we did the back saver sit and reach, so you just do one leg at a time, so right leg was 5 inches and left was 6 inches. Special considerations specifically to ML, so being familiar with the personnel and the procedure, so she came into the fitness center, wants to visit everything and make sure that she knew everybody and where it was and how to do it. And then she came in another time just to practice her whole exercise test before she really had to do it. And then she came in for her test. Individualized testing protocols to her, so she chose her walking speed and chose the weight machine that she felt comfortable with, so the lower body leg press and the upper body seated chest press. She felt comfortable with those two the most, so she chose to do those. And then the max heart rate formulas are different for people with IDs, so it's 210 minus 0.56 times her age minus 15.5. So I did the calculation for ML. Her max heart rate came out to 182 beats per minute, which is a little bit lower than a typical 22-year-old, which would be about 198. So that was hers. I decided her exercise prescription for aerobic would be 3 to 7 days a week to maximize caloric expenditure. So she could do 3 days of walking and 3 days of just physical daily activity. Intensity, so anywhere from 40% to 80% of her heart rate reserve, which I calculated was 110 beats per minute to 158 beats per minute. The time, so it can be 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day, and then the intermittent bouts can be 10 to 15, so I started her off with 30 minutes of walking and then just a 10 minutes bouts of physical activity. Type, primarily walking would be the best, but swimming, exercise classes, anything that they enjoy would be perfectly fine. And she chose walking, and she does do Special Olympics soccer, which is a great once a week aerobic exercise. And we chose gardening for physical activity. It's something that she likes to do, so she was going to do that for 10 minutes bouts. Resistance, so frequency, I just decided to start off with 2 days. Start off with 2 days a week, and then 1 upper body, 1 lower body day. Intensity, we began with 12 reps using 60-70% of her 1 RM, so using a range of 5 to 10 pounds for her upper body and then 20 to 30 pounds for her lower body. Time, we just did 2 sets for each exercise. Type, for her upper body, we're going to do seated chest press, shoulder press, bicep curl machine, and resistance bands. And then lower, leg press, leg extension, leg curl, and resistance bands to get all the major muscle groups. Flexibility, so we're going to start with 3 days a week and increase to daily, which was recommended by the ACSM to up to daily eventually. Stretch to the point of tightness or just slight discomfort, which we went over when we tested her. Time, so hold the stretch for 15 seconds with 2 reps of each stretch. I put some example stretches, and of course she can do more than this, but seated toe touch, shoulder stretch, and butterfly. And then she also enjoys yoga, so we talked about maybe doing yoga once a week as well. In conclusion, so some important things that I want you to take away from working with people with intellectual disabilities. One of the most important things is familiarizing them with the facility, the procedure, and the personnel. It's super important for them to do well and enjoy it and not feel overwhelmed. And don't treat them like they are children. So they're not children. If you're working with adults, obviously they're not children, and they are aware of it when you treat them like children. So it's really important to treat them like any typical adult coming into your facility for an exercise test or exercise training. Be patient and give simple directions. So really be patient with them. It'll take them a little bit of time to understand, but I promise they will. And just give simple directions. So really break down each step, even break it down one further, and make sure they do that one direction and then wait for the next one. Wait for them to do it and then give them the next one. People with intellectual disabilities can participate and enjoy exercise like the general population. So they have some limitations and you may have to make some modifications, but they can do it just like the general population, and they deserve just as good as an exercise program. An exercise professional can really improve their quality of life, and they have a lot of risk factors for CVDs, so they really need to include exercise in their daily life, and us as exercise professionals can really help them, so I think we should focus on that. And those are my references. So that's it. Thank you for watching.